Excellent. So again, hello everyone, and welcome to our next installment of the Rebels with a Heart virtual conference series. I'm incredibly excited to welcome three very distinguished people, distinguished leaders, and I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to be having today. So I will go around here in just a moment, allow each of them to introduce themselves and their companies and their roles and backgrounds. And then we will jump into a spirited conversation around new rules of leadership and what that means in this current environment. So why don't we start at the top of the screen? Rod, I'll hand it over to you and allow you to introduce yourself to the guest we have here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with all of you today. And hello, everybody. My name is Rod Johnson. I work for Farmers Insurance, and I lead the service organization for the Farmers Insurance group of companies. You've probably heard of Farmers. You've probably seen our commercials with the professor. I have the opportunity to lead all of the servicing units that support our agents and our customers for the Farmers unit. So I focus on all of our different lines of business, and predominantly my organization is service organization based, so it's predominantly contact centers. And so I might have a bit of a unique perspective as to leadership in the contact center environment. But I'm excited to be with each of you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Rod. And we're moving next down to you, Veronica. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm Veronica Sommer, founder of The Kindness Solution, and I just left behind a 22-year recruiting career, 16 years owning my own firm, and the last 5 years specializing in cybersecurity, specifically after focusing on IT prior to that. And I have a lifelong passion for personal and professional growth, 2.5 decades, and realized several years ago that my true path was to become a life coach. And so I founded The Kindness Solution this January, and I work with people one-on-one to really explore their truth and tell their truth and live in alignment with that truth. And once they do that, they can extend that outward into their families, into the workplace, into schools, into the greater community. So it's a big project, and I'm really enjoying following my passion.
Awesome. Thank you, Veronica. Appreciate you having the time. And Mindy, we'll head over to you to introduce yourself. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Derek. I'm happy to be here too. My name is Mindi Cox. I lead the People and Great Work team at the O.C. Tanner Company. Our global headquarters are in Salt Lake City, Utah, but we have 6 offices all over the world. Our company is focused on an evolution of sorts. We're a 93-year-old organization that was primarily based in manufacturing company awards and symbols for several decades, but we now are providing cloud-based software that enables strategic culture through appreciation in the workplace. So it's been an awesome ride. I've been with O.C. Tanner for 20 years, and just helping to facilitate that type of evolution and strategic shift in a company is always a gift. One thing that we are focused on right now as a team, and this is work from home.
I love it. So good.
But one thing that we're focused on right now as a team is really discovering kind of this, I don't even want to go post-pandemic workplace and how we embrace the employee experience, but just what is now and what is today. And we were just discussing prior to this call, is it day to day or moment to moment? And how do we support our people through that? And how do we support this collision between work life and home life, and how much more we know and connect with each other at different levels right now. And it has been an amazing gift in my career to participate not only as a human in this global experience, which has been so exceptional, but also as a leader in an organization, and kind of watching an executive team shift their perspective on what workplace's role in people's lives ought to be. And I think it's just an amazingly productive discussion, which is why I'm excited to be here today.
Amazing. It's so appropriate that your son joined us. I think that's just the perfect way to start this conversation as well. And we might see my kids pop in here as well at some point, who knows. So, and for my audience, I'm Derek Lundsten, CEO of LifeGuides. And we're building a platform where caring people to do extraordinary good by using technology to match people who have been through a life challenge of some sort with those who are going through the same or very similar experience now, to provide peer-to-peer mentorship, support, and guidance to help people be happier, healthier, and more productive in both their work life and home life, and where those come together. So to kick it off, as we go into where this conversation will go, naturally, I wanted to kind of point out something that I thought was quite interesting and fun about each of you, and where I see just some overlap and in terms of your roles and your organizations and your values. I mean, so kind of, from the farmer standpoint, yes, I think everyone recognizes that commercial, but I think one of the things that stood out to me about farmers is the core value and the mission about providing peace of mind and the feeling of a farmer's family. I think that that's really interesting in the context of what we just saw Mindi with his son showing up for our session, and how does now family play a role in the context of business. And beyond just the fact that we work to create an income and create a living, they're now literally entering the conversations at times, and they're having a much more active role in terms of what we do and how we do it and why we do it. And I think it's going to continue to evolve. And then same thing, how does kindness come into play in this situation where there's a lot of challenge out there, a lot of new norms that are being created, and the need to adapt, and for people to work through the uncertainty, the discomfort, and the unknowns. I think that's something that for me really stood out, Veronica, about your work in this context, especially working with leaders. And I consider everyone potentially being a leader, depending on how they stand up in that identity. And then obviously the importance of recognition and rewards and engagement is something that you really do, Mindi, and your organization does. And so the intersection of those elements that you all bring, both personally and with what you're doing in your day-to-day, I just thought was a really cool overlap, and I think will serve the conversation well today. So with that, why don't we just start there? I mean, how are you each, interweaving this work-life integration, right? The family-work dynamic, both personally and for the people that you are serving from your employees and your customer set. So whoever wants to take that first, feel free. There's no structure on the floor.
So I've been working at home, obviously, and I have a 15-year-old son and a soon-to-be 12-year-old daughter. So the online learning transition was fairly smooth and relatively easy, since they're pretty self-managed at those ages. But there certainly are more interruptions, and now that they've returned to their gymnastics team and their basketball, there's more driving and picking up and interruptions during the workday that need to be accounted for. And so I think, it's like I've over time just become comfortable with just surrendering to the process instead of resisting it and saying, why does it have to be this way? And, all of the things that we do in our mind, it's like, this is what it is. I don't know if you've ever read the book, Loving What Is by Katie Byron. But we can either resist it or accept it. And so the ways that I've been kind of embracing that is having always been a working parent and an entrepreneur, and most recently an executive at a cybersecurity startup that was a very demanding job. I really didn't take part in my children's learning process other than making sure that they were doing their homework. And so this summer I've shared a mindfulness app with them. So in the morning I have them go on the app. So instead of going onto their phones, I have them go onto this app just to learn that, to start to cultivate that practice. And then I have them watch something motivational and something educational. And so I have given them a list of resources of professional and personal growth people that I've followed over the last 20 years, but they can also source their own. But it's actually been a great, gratifying experience to just think about, as parents and being concerned about the screen time and the digital devices, and they wake up and they go right on their phone. And particularly at my kids' ages, that's like everything in their life is in their world is in that phone. Yeah. And so, kind of showing them how to set practices and use technology for good and set up good habits. That's been one positive spin that I've been using this summer to to roll with it.
Thank you for sharing that, Veronica. And Mindi, on your standpoint with younger children, I have to ask the same question along, kind of continuing that. How are you seeing that same type of trend, both personally, but then also, I'm assuming with you're managing your team, I'd love to hear how you're seeing both sides of that question. Yeah.
Sure. I think the main thing for us has just been acknowledging that everybody is having a different experience. I think for us to assume everyone's excited to be working from home, this is a great change.
Right.
It's the perfect setup for everyone. There are some who are truly struggling, and this, we see that not only with the challenges in interruptions and demands and even just, family living situations, but also for the fact that for some it's been very isolating and, work was their place to come and connect. So how do we substitute for that? How do we build in permission for teams to have connection time? I think when we were in a more traditional work environment, there were always team activities and quarterly lunches and things like that. And I found at the beginning of this transition in March, it was almost the second you started the Zoom call, we were right to business, we were on the agenda, and then you were on to the next meeting and next meeting and the next meeting. So really building in the connection practices that we used to do so naturally when we were face-to-face, but that somehow felt frivolous or silly to do when we had technology in between us, has been some coaching that we have done with our leaders and our team members, and I think has made a difference. The other thing that I would say about that we're really trying to figure out how to navigate, and personally for me, is just the boundary between time. Again, he's going to interrupt me today. This just might be our theme. But the boundary, I will help you in just 1 second. But there just doesn't seem to be, a hard stop between work and home. And I finally had a discussion with my kids because I was bleeding all of the daily events into the dining table, which certainly that has been our tradition, to have those discussions, really healthy discussions about our real lives when we're not together. But now we have this saying. I used to say, you guys, I just had an epiphany. My drive home was really that period where I came to center and I switched gears. And so I said, the hallway is just not long enough for me between the home office and the dinner table or the kitchen. And so my kids can pick up that terminology now. Mom, you need a longer hallway today. Okay. Like that means go take a walk, or you're not shutting off, or I'm talking to you, but you're not hearing me. So I share those stories with our company. I kind of accidentally started a practice where it was just really functional for me to send out a daily email as we all went to work from home. And then I had many people in our company respond, I look every day for your email, I'm inspired every day, I feel connected when I read your emails. And so for 18 weeks, I've written an email every day to 1,600 people. And just by virtue of statistics and topic demand, it turns very personal sometimes, where I'm sharing the hallway conversation. Or last night I talked about, every time my CEO is on a call with me, McKay's got to come in, he knows his voice, he knows his name, he thinks he's his buddy now. And those are good stories to share. And I think that's a boundary that's been bust wide open in our country, probably in our country, in our company for sure, because there was always this professional barrier of, she's got it all together, or clearly she's got it figured out, or he's got it figured out. And in this environment, you just can't always have it figured out all the time. And there is such a personal window literally into each of our homes right now. So I would just suggest, if leaders aren't being vulnerable about the fact that they're struggling with that too, and getting really real with employees for whom that is a struggle, it's a missed opportunity, because it's a conversation that needs to happen for that connection to be made in your company.
It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to come back with some additional questions on that, but I want to give you, Rod, the chance to chime in on this topic as well, both personally and from your organizational standpoint.
Yeah, so personally, thank you. And I absolutely appreciate Veronica and Mindy's comments, because I think they absolutely mirror mine. So I don't love working at home. And for me, that drive home was absolutely respite from a long day of work and challenging meetings, et cetera. And so that time was very, very helpful. prior to moving back to Arizona, where I live now, I actually lived in California, and my commute time was about an hour. So I had really, really good decompression time. Then moving to Arizona went to about 20 minutes, and now it's about 3 seconds. And that was really important time to me. And so it's something that I've had to focus on building back in, even if it's just staying in the back room for a few minutes. The other thing for me is there's not a perfect setup in my house. My wife and I share an office, and she's in the office throughout the day. And so I've spent time in about 3 different makeshift offices across our house so that I can have a meeting like this without a whole bunch of interruptions. And by the way, today they're working on Windows, and so it sounds really loud at different times. So I'm trying to go on mute in between comments. So that part has not been perfect for me. And then as I look at my employees, as we transitioned into the remote work environment, we literally did it in a 48-hour period. So as soon as we started to see it get bad, we decided as a company that we weren't going to make individual decisions for each of our buildings, but we were going to make a unilateral decision across all of them and send people home. And so we literally moved our employee base home in about 48 hours, which meant that those employees literally picked up what they had and went home. Yeah. And many of them left things on their desk that helped them be productive, that helped comfort them throughout a long day. Maybe they're pictures of family, maybe it's something related to maybe it's an additional monitor or something that they typically use. But all of that kind of got left behind in that rapid transition home. And when we first did it, I had this recurring nightmare that I had employees that were, and since they're contact center employees, I had this recurrent nightmare that some of them were sitting on the edge of their bed with a laptop on their lap, and they were taking phone calls on behalf of farmers. And that is not conducive to a great work environment. And so that was something that was a huge fear of mine up front. Everybody in our organization was excited about the fact that we moved everybody home, and we had that their safety and their health was at the forefront of all of our concerns. But that didn't make it any easier as they were transitioning into this really odd social relationship-less type of remote environment. And so we really needed to focus on how we could somehow approximate those water cooler discussions and those informal communication networks and those social types of things that they would do in the workplace, how we could approximate that in home. And it's not easy, and it's not perfect, and it's just something that has been a work in progress. But just to put a cap on all of that, it's gone well. It's just something that is going to be a work in progress, I think, for all of us, and I think we have to acknowledge it.
It's great. So thank you. So kind of digging in further on that, what have you done around helping people improve their work environment specifically? Or have you done something like that? Because that was such a strong nightmare for you, did you take action in terms of trying? Yeah. What did you do for that, Rob?
Yeah, we did. We typically have very, very strong controls around what they can take home and what they can keep in the office. And we started a whole bunch, we surveyed our employees relentlessly for the first few weeks just to kind of check in on them, see how they were. I did a number of virtual roundtables and things like that to kind of really get to the things that they were needing. And it came down to almost some of the basic needs, and that was a monitor, a chair, and if they had a sit-stand desk, that sit-stand desk. And so we actually opened up the buildings and in a social distancing type of way, let them come in and take those home, which is not normal for a large company to have them take physical facility types of equipment home to their home office. And that was when we didn't know this would be any longer than 2 months. We've since made the decision to keep everybody remote at least through the end of this year. And so it ended up being a very, very important aspect of keeping their work environment at least stable. I still have this concern that the workplace for them isn't perfect, and that it's not fully controllable. So we just have to try and give them the tools to the extent that we can, so that they can have that a little bit better.
That's great. So to follow on to that question for you, Mindi, I mean, I recognize this is part of OC Tanner's business, is creating incentives and rewards and ways to improve that experience. How are you seeing your clients and working with your teams kind of around this topic? That's question one. And then kind of going back to something you said that I was curious about, and this is where I can pass it back to you as well, Veronica. Leadership vulnerability. Are you seeing that example set widespread within OC Tanner, or do you still find yourself being in a minority about being that open and candid around what's happening? So 2 questions that I want to come back and throw on you. your way.
Sure, and I think much like Rod, I think we all kind of went home and thought, well, this will be cute for a few weeks, right? And then we'll be back. And our clients did the same thing, you know, hey, just hold our orders. Just, you know, we'll make sure we have those recognition moments, those milestone career achievement celebrations when we get back to the office. And as the weeks ticked on, we were able to demonstrate not only for ourselves, we did the same thing. Oh, we want to have that 30-year celebration when we're all back together, or that platinum or president's award. That really has to be done in person.
Right.
But the timeliness and the encouragement and the feedback and the alignment that all of those moments provide are necessary now. So we really began proving to ourselves, you can do this. You can do this virtually. And whether that's having, you know, flowers and a meal show up just at the right time that the call starts and the award is shipped to the home, and we have all of their family members are now, regardless of geography, invited to participate in those moments with our people. That's been new, and that has been incredibly emotional for everyone to witness. Oh my goodness, they've got their parents in Chicago and their kid who's away at college, and their spouse who would normally be at work, where it used to be such a small work-centric group, that we've got this broader social network that's important to the individual who's being honored, that it's just, the moment is just as accessible to those people as it is to the participants. So we've really coached our clients in that direction, even as far as to provide some really celebratory Zoom backgrounds that are super fun, trying to turn those celebration moments into something that's memorable, setting, you know, some guidelines around recording the calls, and then they have this souvenir of that moment that they can revisit that together. And then again, just, you know, the coaching through how to have, whether it's deliveries or an award arrive in time, that they have a tangible reminder of this moment that they're about to celebrate. A lot of our clients who said, hey, put our program on hold, we don't know how to do this right now, have since brought it back to life and are telling us beautiful stories of, you're exactly right. If we need, more than ever, we need to be telling our people, thank you for what you're doing. The contribution you're making means so much. You absolutely went out of your way and above and beyond on this project. And here's the symbol of our appreciation in this moment that we want to take to recognize you. So that's, once somebody experiences that, either as a recipient or a participant, the learning is instant and it's obvious.
Right.
But it's just getting people over that hurdle of, you can enable that now.
Yeah.
As far as leadership vulnerability goes, this came out actually just very early for me. About 4 days into work from home, Salt Lake City experienced an earthquake. And so we had just moved everybody home. To Rod's point, we had just ransacked our offices and everybody pulled up their trucks and loaded in everything that they needed to do. And had just kind of gotten to that place where we were kind of 2 days in, and the lights were on and everybody was connecting, and it sort of felt a little bit settled. And then this earthquake threatened our ability to stay operating for our 350 site-dependent employees who we had tried to build this super protective bubble around and all these processes to protect their health. And I cried in my kitchen that morning. And that day, I just, instead of the bullet list email of how to stay safe and what you need from your office, I just started with, I cried today. And the avalanche of response to that just let me know, whoa, we are in a different moment.
Yeah.
People need to, people saying me too, me too, me too. And then when I shared that with my executive team, I think that that barrier had then been broken. Not only for me, but for all of us, and for them to be really real about the good days and the bad days too. So I work with an amazing team, and because we're in a space where appreciation, recognition, human values, and encouragement are like what we live and breathe. We have leaders that are wired that way to begin with. But anything that was left as far as, I'm not sure what feels appropriate, gave way to, I need to be real about what's going on in my team.
Wow, that's so powerful. And yeah, the rules of appropriateness, the norms, the mores are totally changing with in this environment. We'll come back and talk more about that. But Veronica, I know you've been watching you nod in acknowledgement throughout both of these comments. Anything you'd like to add on this topic from your standpoint, working with different leaders of different organizations and what you're seeing within different cultures as you're kind of hearing firsthand accounts from Mindi and Rod?
Absolutely. Well, I think, I think that's a beautiful example, Mindi, of just what an opportunity, to create connection and trust with with employees within the organization, and be relatable and recognize life is messy, and, perfection's an impossible standard. And no matter how great a leader you are, things are hard sometimes. And, in the 22 years that I was recruiting for a very wide range of organizations, the main reason that people left the company was because of a boss. And it was because either they didn't feel valued, they didn't feel seen or heard, the person didn't take an interest in the employee. And just by being vulnerable and sharing your own personal story, makes other people feel seen and heard. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, like I said, the main reason that people leave companies is because of maybe that lack of vulnerable leadership.
Do you all think that leaders are getting truly more vulnerable in this process? Like the technology, even with the disconnect, that we're actually seeing people truly be willing to open up more? Like Roger's smiling there, so yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to, for one, and I think that in addition to the pandemic, we have race issues and social justice issues that are really prominent on our employees' minds. Yeah. And I think if there's a place where my leadership team, and I personally have been vulnerable, it's in talking about that, because it is something that, and even in this remote environment, it's even more difficult to address. It feels easier when you're face to face with somebody to talk to somebody about something as important as race. And virtually it feels a little bit more difficult. But I found that the more that we talk about those hard things, and the more that we create those vehicles to talk about those hard things, it goes back to the trust that both Mindi and Veronica mentioned. It helps us to maintain the trust in our employees that we've gained, despite all the things going on. And what we've had to do as an organization is, from the very top down, really amp up our level of formal and informal communication. Mm. And one of those ways is by putting out videos, and not the high gloss types of corporate produced videos we've done in the past, but our CEO with a handheld out on his deck saying, here's what's on my mind, and here are the things we're going to do as an organization to address it. I'm doing one of those today, and the bullet points have changed so frequently just because of what's happening right now on a day-to-day basis. So it's something that we have found critical. But even more important, and where I think the authenticity can really get driven home, is in the Q&A. After those videos are posted on our company intranet, it's in the Q&A and the commentary and the rich dialogue that happens thereafter as people begin to comment on what they just heard. And our leaders have really stepped up in their engagement there to address and to talk about and to use that as information as to how we can make decisions going forward.
I'm so happy you raised that point, because I think that is a huge, the level of awareness and discussion happening within companies that we're working with and we see is unlike ever before. So I think that, to your point, just because of technology connectivity and because of the fact we are dispersed, people are communicating, and there's a greater openness around what can be said within the walls of the corporation, the virtual walls, right? And I think that it's just it's really changing how we're communicating and hearing each other. I think it's really, really fascinating time. So along that same line, with this particular topic, Mindi and Veronica, how are you seeing that within your organization, with your clients as well, around racial and social justice topics, and how that's happening around the conversation? Because it is happening at a different level than we've ever seen before from what I see. So I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
I would just say that we let our people talk about it. So yeah. Our approach, there was definitely a crescendo in the conversation. And I just recall one Saturday morning talking to a team member on our executive team who happens to be a Black female, and just saying, "How are you doing?" And she called me and said, we have to say something. And it was obvious that by that Monday, we needed to say something that was deeply personal to our people. And it was good to be able to say, okay, how do we do this? And our first inclination, and I think sometimes this is, well, let's get someone else who's an expert, who's in the field, who knows how to facilitate these, who will be perfect and flawless, and who we can absolutely turn over responsibility to come facilitate some type of a town hall discussion or a presentation. We'll present, we'll do a presentation. And over the course of that weekend, that just absolutely was not the right solution for us. That wasn't who we were. Yeah. That wasn't who was hurting. Our people were hurting. Our people were living in Minneapolis. Our people are in Texas. Our people, are from 56 different countries, speaking 65 languages. And it was important for us to acknowledge that diversity and to make sure that, that we recognized it as a strength. And so we talked to our people, and we had 6 powerful, brave souls who facilitated telling their stories. And instead of us learning about race through the lens of an academic, we heard very personal stories from people we already loved, people we already were endeared to, people we already would have done anything to protect. And our eyes were opened to their everyday experiences that were outside of their interactions with people at work. That became, in using the words of our own people, a life-changing experience. That recording was shared far and wide with family members, with neighborhoods, with just because it was so real and in that moment. And it was something I would do again and again and again. And I don't know in a traditional environment if we would have had the guts to do it. But because we'd been on this journey to this point where we just trusted that we had a connection and a relationship with each other that was different than we had in the halls of the office, it was made possible. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think that's huge testament to your leadership and what you're doing. And I agree that everything's changing. That's why we call this the new rules. Like we're literally reevaluating the rules of leadership and business communication and all different facets. I think it's a really exciting time and progressive time for corporate cultures and organizations and our people. So Veronica or Rod, do you have any thoughts on, you want to follow on for this topic specifically?
The only thing I would add is just, looking at it through the lens of kindness, which is what I do in everything, is it really does take courage to have those conversations. And oftentimes people think of kindness as, sugar, spice, and everything nice, but it really is about taking a genuine interest, having the courage to have difficult conversations. And again, just going back to having people feel seen and heard. That's all people really want, and that's what creates genuine connection and trust. And that's what gets people through these challenging times. And, it's a great example, Mindi. I love that story.
Yeah, so that point around, one word you said specifically is around responsibility, personal responsibility, and also you tied what you said, Veronica, around kindness. Like, is that the responsibility that we're really selling here, right? That we need to be seeing each other and hearing each other at a different, and we're being forced to raise our game and do a better job at it because we actually have physical distance between us. It's requiring us literally to upgrade our skills around communication, and kindness is kind of that, to your point, it's a precursor of trust, right? It's an undercurrent. So, I mean, I do think that's a big part of it. And then from that standpoint too, I mean, kind of coming back to the business side, right? I mean, how are you translating that even into the customer experience? I mean, you're literally in the business of helping people work through challenging situations in their life. I mean, how are you seeing that evolve even beyond the organizational piece, right? Outside the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. It does start with our employees. I mean, you mentioned at the outset that our whole brand messaging is about getting people back and getting them back and healthy and back to where they have them be restored. That doesn't happen unless our employees feel restored. unless our employees feel comfortable and stable and safe and are able to deliver that service to them. Because it's hard to ask somebody to do something for somebody else if they don't feel themselves. And that's been where our focus has been, candidly. I think our customer engagement and the results that we have as we support our customer base are only exponentially increased by the fact that our employees feel safe, they can do it, they feel supported, they trust the organization they're working for, and that we've been able to do all the things that we've just been talking about just for the last few minutes so that they can feel like we care about them. That's enabled them to deliver that level of service.
Yeah, powerful. The other question I had from the audience actually was around engagement surveys and the metrics that you all are using and how that, and I personally am curious, how has that evolved? How is that evolving, right? When you look at it from the beginning, because I know you, Rod, you said you did quite a bit of that. How are you seeing that change over time? And what are you anticipating as you look out 4 months from now, right? Is what's happening now that we're in the summer and this has gone on for some time and there's no clear end in sight. What are you planning now? How are you adapting your approach to leading?
Yeah, that's great. So the very first part of your conversation was about engagement surveys. We are absolutely committed to understanding the feedback of our employees, and engagement surveys have played a powerful role in that, but they have not been enough. When we got into this pandemic, we found that the normal questions that we asked on the engagement survey were great and they tracked well and they showed improvement, but they didn't give us enough information about how our employees were feeling about what was going on there. And so that's where we initiated additional surveys. And there's absolutely the risk of survey fatigue, but it's something that we needed to do to be able to understand what their core needs were. But then in addition to that, we needed to increase the number of conversations that we are having that was pulling similar information that we would normally from a survey or from the engagement survey. And that is by asking them point blank. So I think since the pandemic has started, I personally, and this is not reflective of the host of other leaders that are doing it, I think I've held 40 virtual roundtables since those started. With the reason being, and those are just small roundtables of people. The reason being is we really wanted to hear them say, here are the things that I'm experiencing. Here's what I'm hearing from our customers. Here's what it's like to be me in this current situation now, and here's what I need from you, and then making it okay to have that conversation. And so we've really amped that up. In terms of what that means as we go forward, I think all of this just informs our path forward. I don't know where we'll land in terms of what the mix of in-office, out-of-office will be in the future. I know that all of this rich experience that we're going through right now as an organization and the feedback we're getting from our employees is informing what that future strategy looks like and how we lead our organization going forward. My sense is there'll be a much higher percentage of our workforce that is remote in some way, shape, or form, but that really depends on them. What we have found in all of this is my bet about which employees would appreciate being remote versus the ones that would want to be in the office has absolutely flipped. The ones that I anticipated would want to stay home forever are like, I'm done. I need the social experiment needs to be over. Where the ones that I thought might struggle a little more are absolutely excelling and really, really appreciating what that remote environment does for them. So it causes us to go back to the drawing board and really use this information to inform what our strategy is going forward.
That's helpful. Mindi, I know this is a key part of what your organization does as well with your clients. Are you seeing certain trends and gaps across the market in this area around engagement as well as gaps that you see companies adapting as a result of this effort?
Sure, and I think everybody's searching for what are the right questions, what ought I be doing at this time, and so it's always been our practice that you just have to stay true to who you are as an organization. I think the temptation we have is that we'll hear an idea or we'll read an article or, oh, we should be doing that too. Not every practice translates into every culture. So having the lens of, well, what is it that they were trying to accomplish and what would be our version of that has always been our best advice to our clients. And I think even to our people, they look to an example, maybe an organization or their family, and if I just do X, Y, and Z, surely I will, be as successful or as satisfied or having outcomes that this person or this organization is having. And because we have different cultures and we attract different people, we have to have our own versions of that. One thing that I picked up that I just wrote down, Rod, I'm going to take from you back to my team is just to make sure that the promise we're making to our clients is the promise we're keeping to our people. So when I think about that for OC Tanner, you know, we promise our clients that we will help people thrive at work. That's what we do. That's what you do with, you know, culture focused efforts in leadership, purpose, well-being, appreciation, success, all of those areas that we tell every client that they need to be focusing on if they want to have a rich and successful employee experience. But I absolutely, and of course, this is, you know, what we focus on, but I want to be calling out how we're keeping that promise with our people and making sure that we're just as diligent about how we are serving our people internally as we are about the advice that we're giving externally. So I really appreciate that. One thing I will add, in addition to surveys, which have been helpful to us too, and we're very upfront with our people and just said it makes no sense to ask you the questions that we usually ask you every April, because what are you gonna, like, how do we even compare? Like, there's not even a trend that would make sense to put these responses apples to apples. So we're going to do a completely now-based survey that asks you questions related to your current reality, and that was helpful for us, even just to get a gauge on, you know, a very high trust, very high hope, very high engagement, but also, you know, our lowest score, I think, was an 81 in job security, which just, I think, is just a reflection of the society that we're living in right now, the market, that's real. And so we needed to address that as an organization. But we also got a lot of feedback about the fact that we were providing places, electronic places for people to gather. So for us, we started a channel on our Teams application. Microsoft Teams is just a gathering place like Slack or Facebook Workplace or whatever your organization uses. But we called it Corona, like NAH, like just kind of with that funny little slant on it. And we invite people to post pictures of their pets. We invite them to post pictures of their babies and the weddings that are the drive-by reception or whatever it is. And that has become such a great outlet for community that is a substitute for the water cooler or the lunch, you know, discussions. And if there's one thing I would recommend, if your company hasn't done that already, is just to give people a place to gather. That happens naturally on Zoom with their teams, but as a collective, give a general place for them to gather electronically.
So thank you for that. I have so many questions popping in that part. This is an question for all of you. Are you identifying new metrics? Like when you look at it, like completely new KPIs and metrics as a result of this whole experience, right? Like, like when you look at these surveys, are you actually looking at how you measure your team's happiness, not beyond just business? Like, is it not engagement in the traditional sense, but something different, something new? Like, is this literally changing the way that you look at the culture? And if the answer may be no, but I'm just curious if it is.
I think we are. I'm sorry, Mindy, go ahead.
Yeah, Brad.
I was going to say, I think it's altering the importance of certain metrics, I guess I would say, Derek. I don't know that we're looking at different metrics. I think we're paying close attention to the safe and well-being of our employees and how that comes out in surveys, et cetera. In terms of different KPIs, probably not. I will say that when you look at broader KPIs, particularly for my group, contact centers, I think you have to be really open to saying we are in a really unique situation here. And so the way that you normally manage a contact center operation or an operation like that have to look a little bit different right now. And you have to give credence to that. Otherwise, every good piece of goodwill that you engendered by sending everybody home, keeping everybody safe, doing all the cultural things you're doing, that all goes by the wayside if they don't feel like you're being fair in how now you're looking at their performance. And I think that's really critical for us to remember and to address in my type of operation in particular, but more broadly as well, that you have to pay attention to that. This is a very unique environment. Mindy's son was in the back. I was on a call a little while ago where I could hear somebody's bird and dog barking in the background, and that might come out somehow in a customer survey, or might come out somehow in the length of time they're taking to do something. It's imperative for us to address that head on and say, that is okay. We are in a unique environment. We have to look at those metrics differently.
I was just going to add that for us, the metrics of success don't change. I mean, the foundation of what we need to do to run a successful business is the same, but the way we've resourced that to enable that success is definitely changed. And if you're trying to accomplish the same goals in the traditional methods, that's just it just doesn't fit right now.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because I think that maybe that's part of where I was going too. I mean, when you think about this new world of connectivity, where we literally are connected or can be connected 24/7, people can work within different boundaries of their family, their time, their structure. Right now that you are balancing work and school and activities, I mean, is there new ways for us to measure collaboration? Is there new ways to, for us to optimize for people's flow states and schedules and all that? And I just wonder what organizations and what you are doing as leaders to start thinking about that, because I just think that's, especially as we look at going back to school in the fall, and some states are, some states aren't, right? And what does that mean? And I just think that that's something that we will be, I look ahead and I believe that's something we're going to be being asked about. And then it goes back to, okay, we used to have a 5-day work week. Now we have 7-day weeks that are, literally, it's just different. The way we look at time and we look at productivity is different. And so how do we address that relative to a broad population set? And I just think that's going to be something that we look at differently as we look at how we enhance our productivity. So Veronica, we haven't heard from you in a little bit, so I want to give you the chance to chime in on any of these topics that we've been kind of kicking around and whatever seems to pop for you.
Yeah, I mean, since I'm not in an organization right now and it's just me solo, the only thing I would add as a kind of an afterthought is there's all of this talk about the new normal and the new future and not knowing what that looks like. But I think it is important to look at all of it as an opportunity with the examples that have been shared. And, the old way, I mean, there were a lot of people that were really stretched to the absolute max and that were, really stressed and, want to connect, want to be kind, but between the commute and family obligations and, parental stuff after, in addition to the job, I mean, we're complex people and we have to look at individuals holistically from a mental, emotional, and physical well-being perspective. And it is an opportunity, I think, for people just to slow down. And because they are more literally grounded at home, everybody has an opportunity to assess their values, assess, am I living in alignment with what I say is important to me, both, from a work perspective and a personal perspective. So it's a great opportunity.
I would just add too, I think if I think back years ago when we were talking about employee experience and people feeling stretched and always on, it was because that was enabled through electronics. Right? Like suddenly my phone was my email, I felt like I had to check it all the time. People were reaching me via text and whoa, what are we going to do with this always on thing? And that became a big discussion in our company. And I think the answer is always with our people. They, when we co-create that solution for them, what's working, what's not, what kind of schedules would be best in different positions. I think whenever we as leaders can say there has to be a right answer and it's got to be the right answer for everybody, we're going to get it wrong every time. So just having the vulnerability of a leader to say, I identify this as a problem. I think I'm asking the right question, but I know you have the solution. So can we talk about what that is? I think that's going to be a much more productive, fluid, modern leadership discussion that is necessary in not only this environment, but for all of the expectations that are to come, regardless of how this pandemic plays out. Yeah.
So that's kind of a good pre-frame for one of the questions that came from the audience, which is how do you measure employee productivity while remote, right? I think that's kind of bringing these questions together. What are each of you doing, your organization's doing now differently or that you see as changing now that's allowing you to progress into a different model, if you are at this point or still evaluating? So
I can take that one first. So all of the things that we have measured in the physical environment, we can measure in the remote environment. So none of those measurements change for us. But to the point that I made a little bit earlier, it requires us to look at them with all of this in mind, so that we can still manage it, but at the same point have the level of sensitivity and appreciation for this unique environment that we're in. But none of the metrics for us change. The way that it changes the way that we look at our business in the future, I just think all of our old biases about proximity to office, I think, are under challenge now, right? Yeah. Because we've all proven that whether we like it or not, there's the possibility for there to be a much stronger remote presence in the work that we do. And I think some of those biases that have been built into our business model over the years have to be challenged now, given what we know.
Helpful. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, and I think for us, again, we turn to our teams and say, how will we know we're successful? For my people team, it's how do we virtualize everything that people walk into our team for? How do we offer it? How do we be proactive about making sure that we're reaching out in the way that people were pulling information from us before? So I've got a wellness leader that's got her whole family on a Zoom workout every, different times of the day. And we're reaching out in a wellness context about social justice issues now, and talking about how dealing with that, those heart issues can affect our health. And so I'm proud of a team that has been able to reimagine their delivery. And I think for each of our teams, that's different. Whether I have super objective metrics because I'm in a call center and I'm either taking the number of calls I need to take or I'm not, or I have a team where my deliverables are a little bit more squishy and my deliverables are a little bit more intangible. Just inviting people to reimagine that work and then kind of co-creating what that success will look like. I will know I have been successful if I have X number of people join this workout session, or I have a 50% growth in the number of people that attend that internal webinar on a specific topic. That has just been something that we've had to be pretty fluid about. But again, I'm huge advocate for co-creating those goals. I think people sometimes will create metrics that are more difficult or more ambitious than we could ever imagine for them. And I often, find myself underestimating the impact that they're hoping to make. So I love to hear the difference that they want to see.
I think for working parents in particular, I mean, we all know all of the things that we should do from a self-care perspective: exercise, meditate, yoga, all of the things. And but it is, if you are commuting to a place and you do have children and you do have to get them ready and you do have to drive them and you have all of these other obligations, it is more challenging than for someone, say, that's single, to work all the other self-care things into the equation. And so I think Rod is right about these past biases. And I think probably working parents are feeling, a bit of breathing room of being off that pace and that, like at times unmanageable schedule and at times feeling unsustainable schedule. So now that they can incorporate those wellness practices at home and still be engaged and productive at work.
Thanks, Veronica.
Hey, Derek, if I might add, one of the things that we talked about sort of in the pre-meeting, or we were laughing about, was actually time away. And one of the things that we have found with our employees is, because it's harder to find a fun vacation when we're all sort of in this world of being remote and virtual and not being able to go very far from the home, that time away from the desk in the office is still critically important. And it's something that we have been reinforcing with our teams over the last number of months. Is you still got to take your vacation. It's a really important mental break to be able to take that vacation time, because the temptation is to say, I don't really have any place fun to go, so I'm going to keep working. Right. But I don't think that that's a realistic environment for any of us to continue working without that mental break. And so that's something that we've been reinforcing with our employees over the last number of weeks.
I'm glad you brought that up, especially this time of year. And I think that's just in general, it's a huge time for us all to take a pause and really look at what's important. Why are we doing this? And what are we doing it for? As we look, I think that's what the whole point of this pandemic's been about, is really a collective moment of introspection around, from an individual and a corporate standpoint, what do we value and how do we work more effectively to achieve whatever it is that we're here to do? So we're here at the top of the hour, and I just want to acknowledge each of you for being, such great leaders and rebels with a heart, and really demonstrating what it's like to be authentic and vulnerable, and to try and experiment and adjust through this whole process. And just really am grateful for you all taking your time and investing your time with this audience and with your people and your organizations. I just think it's really a pleasure, and I'm really appreciative of the time you spent with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And thank you for everyone for joining us on today's Rebels with a Heart, and we'll look forward to seeing all of you soon.